I just wanted to add to what Yinka was saying. You know, what he's talking about and what these guys too have been talking about are that our current elected officials aren't doing their job. Okay, so we can all be political, we can all talk about the types of things that we would like to have be different in our government. But at the very basic part of why we run for office is because we take our job seriously. I mean, why go through the trouble of raising money, run for office, be in this public spotlight, go all over the state to win your seat as Secretary of State in this example, and then not do your job? I mean, it's crazy. You know, the current Secretary of State is also not taking any of the federal funds available to make our voting systems more secure. This is all your taxpayer dollars that have gone to Washington, D.C., that the Secretary of State says, you know what, you guys keep that money. We're good. We don't need to have our money back to make our voting systems more safe. So in general, you know, elect people who you think are going to do their job. I mean, we're going to work for you. You guys are the bosses here. And you're the ones who get to either hire us or fire us. So I would look for that the next time you're looking to vote for somebody.
So I think this issue, as Nick was saying, it is the fundamental issue. If we don't have access, we don't have the ability to change anything about our government. And I think it shows you something when the Republican Party appears that they are afraid of voters. That they are not interested in actually doing what we're doing right now, coming out and talking to you, trying to hear your perspective, meet you where you are. Instead, they want to deny you the ability to have a voice. And one of the jobs that the Attorney General has is to protect your constitutional rights. And there is no more fundamental constitutional right in this country than your right to vote. And I am very fearful about what you've seen the Republicans already doing right now in the legislature to try to undermine Clean Missouri. Just give them a little time. They're going to go to the courts next, because they're going to try to find ways, even within that law that you all voted to pass. When you skip the politicians because they weren't getting it done, you voted to pass that law. They're trying to undermine it because they're not interested in what the voters want. They're interested in what their friends want. And so if there's any issue that I'm going to be vigorous in making sure when I'm Attorney General is enforced, is that your will in that Clean Missouri Act is enforced and that your vote will count.
This is why we need civil rights enforcement in our state, and it's why we will have a civil rights division at the Attorney General's office.
I also want to mention the fact that, you know, you can do it by ballot initiative and all of that, but Wiley Price has been championing voter rights in the Missouri House of Representatives. And if you want to help him out, you need to look online and come when his bill is being heard in committee and testify in committee. That's how we get bills out of committee. That's how we get them to the floor when we get backed up on that. And I filed a companion bill to support his automatic voting in the legislature. Okay, and so we talked about, we got all the voting was out the way. Okay, so we talked about, and if anybody else have questions, you still got time to get them in. You know, people walking around, get them, raise your hand. They'll pick them up. Somebody, he got a question back in the back. Since we're talking about Clean Missouri, how do we achieve the mandate of Clean Missouri, which has been watered down by Republicans? Now, let me say this. Clean Missouri was the constitutional amendment that passed, so it's in the Constitution, and I don't think we passed anything successfully last year to interfere with it yet, but they will come after this session. You can answer.
Well, you know, part of the reason why we have to rely so much on ballot initiatives is because of the way that we are currently underrepresented as Democrats in the Missouri legislature. I don't want to get into a whole discussion about gerrymandering, but I know you guys know what that is. It's a systematic way for voters to be just divided up into different areas so that the legislator gets to pick their voters instead of the other way around. It takes a lot of effort and time and money to get a ballot initiative passed. And so, as citizens, as people who have elected officials in Jefferson City, we need to pressure them to keep the word of the people as the law of the land. I would also encourage you to talk to your friends. I mean, you may live in a park, if you live in the city of St. Louis, or you live on the St. Louis side of the state, you may already have a Democratic representative who's fighting fighting for you and upholding your rights and pays attention to what you want, I encourage you to talk to your family and friends and people who have representation that is from the Republicans. I know it hurts. I know it's painful. But one of the ways we can make Jefferson City more attuned to our values as Democrats is to help those folks in purple parts of our state elect Democrats to their districts. And that's one of the reasons I'm running for state treasurer, because I run in those purple areas. I know we have to flip those seats or else the senator can't do her job, or Representative Price can't do his job. We need to have more people for them to work with. And, you know, voting is a numbers game. They can only pass a bill when they have a certain number of votes. So I encourage you to reach out and talk to folks who are in other parts of the state as well.
I agree with Vicki. This is the work of us all to get more representation in the State House and talking to folks who don't agree with the way you see the world. It's not good enough to, this is great that you're here and you're engaging, but we've got to also reach out to people who may see things differently. Because if we want to change the State House and we want to protect things like Clean Missouri, we've got to have the numbers in the House and in the Senate. And so I think it's about all of us engaging folks who think differently, who are from different parts of the state. Many of us have family members in other parts of the state. And so it's about engaging all across the state and not only around this region.
And I'm going to steal this for a second. You can also give money to candidates who aren't in your district. So feel free to do that as well.
This topic gets me real fired up. We've got an issue with Clean Missouri where they try to change Missouri's Sunshine Law, our public transparency law. And what they were trying to do was they were trying to insert two little lines that would have made it impossible for us to even get records from our local school districts, from our school boards, which is ridiculous. But the reason that they're doing this, the reason that they're pumping all this money in through dark money instead of just normal rich people money, is because they're trying to eliminate transparency. And if you eliminate transparency, you can eliminate accountability. That's one of the reasons why I've been pursuing the Sunshine Law lawsuit against our current administration now on my own, with my own money. Oh my God, my credit card, thank God for that. But as Attorney General, that is the office that is supposed to enforce Missouri's Sunshine Law. He's refusing to do it. As Attorney General, I certainly will.
We'll talk a little bit about Clean Missouri, so you know how I feel about it, but I'll touch on what Vicki was saying about gerrymandering. This is a real serious issue, and it's one of the main reasons that we are currently not in the majority in Jefferson City. It's not because we don't have the support. It's not because voters don't believe in the things that we believe in. Last time all our ballot initiatives passed, Nicole Galloway won her race, but we cannot win elections if the lines are drawn in such a way that your vote doesn't really count, because it's in a place where it's not going to affect the outcome. This is an issue that I spent most of my last year studying. I actually published an entire paper on this issue because I was so blown away by the way the Republicans have succeeded in taking away your voice, not just by denying you access to the ballot box, not just by taking you off the voter rolls when you go to the polls to vote, but making it so that when you do go to vote, it doesn't affect anything. Clean Missouri is supposed to fix that. Clean Missouri is set up so that we will have a demographer who will be a nonpartisan person drawing the lines to make the districts competitive, meaning your vote has a chance of affecting the outcome. But like I said, watch out. They're trying to fight with Senator May right now in the legislature. In a few months, they're going to be in the courtroom. And if we don't have people who are skilled lawyers advocating to protect that huge gain that you all made as voters last time, then we're going to be where we are right now. Doing all that we can to try to convince people, winning their support, and still not winning majorities in the legislature. So it's one of the main issues that we should all be focused on, and one that I'll be very focused on as Attorney General.
So the next question has to do with what will you do to address mass incarceration, reduce prison populations, and this is about using your influence and your position. Sometimes, our offices don't directly affect the question, but as a statewide elected official, how will you help reduce mass incarceration, reduce prison population, and create better paths, economic opportunities for those who have been incarcerated?
This is a a huge, huge issue in our state, and one that I saw firsthand as a prosecutor. All of the young, particularly mostly young men, go into prison. So one of the challenges, when people do not feel they have hope, they don't feel that their future matters, then people do things that will cause them to ultimately end up in prison. How many of you have read Michelle Alexander's book about mass incarceration? If you have not read that book, please add it to your reading list for the next couple months. It is a terrific book, and it breaks down this issue and some of the solutions to this issue. This is ultimately an education issue, and it's an economic issue. When folks do not have and we talked about educational equity earlier, and that's why educational equity is so important in this region all over the state, is you can predict, and in Texas, the state I grew up in high school, you can predict Texas would base the number of prisons they were going to build based on fourth grade reading levels. And so we ultimately want to address the issue of mass incarceration. We've got to get to educational equity. And the solutions are not hidden or buried somewhere. The solutions are hiding in plain sight in a beautiful report called the Ferguson Commission Report. It is a 200-page report that lays out a roadmap that is not only effective for this region, but quite frankly for this state, and quite frankly for this country. And so when you begin to implement some of those things, and you begin to address this issue of mass incarceration.
Yeah, and I was just going to say the Ferguson Commission report. We've got it written. I was pretty involved in that process. I've also been on a task force now called the Keep Kids in Class program, which focuses on the school-to-prison pipeline like you were talking about. That's definitely an extremely important way for us to get involved. I've worked for the Department of Corrections in our state. I've worked with jails all over our state, and I'm suing one right now in St. Louis. We have the workhouse here that is costing $16 million a year, and we're holding now less than 300 people in that building. For that $16 million, we just implemented Cure Violence in St. Louis, thank goodness. We could have implemented it throughout the entire city and gone even into the county for that same amount of money. And with those 200 people, believe it or not, we actually have room for them right now in the Justice Center. But instead, we're renting rooms out to the federal government so that we can make some money off of those prisoners. They can go somewhere else, and that's usually what they do. They go to different jails throughout our state, and that's where they can be housed, and we can get rid of the workhouse and take $16 million and actually invest it into the community. We need to reinvest in communities throughout our state. We are incarcerating far too many people. We need to invest in diversion courts so that we're treating folks. If you look at the statistics now, the number of people who are in prisons in our state who have addiction issues, it's huge. For men and for women, it's above 90%. But instead of treating folks, instead of getting folks the things that they need, we're just locking them up and hoping that they get better at the end of it without any re-entry plan whatsoever. We need smart, different law enforcement, not the same crap that we've been doing for so long. And we need someone who's going to focus on this as a primary issue. And the Attorney General's office can do a whole lot. I've actually been working with prosecutors and law enforcement officers and community members throughout our state already on plans for this issue. So it's a very important one. And it's one that I think even the governor right now will be able to get on board with reducing our prison population. We can invest that in our